Welcome to Basic Brewing Video. I'm James Spencer.
I'm Steve Wilkes in Studio C12.
And this is shoot number 2 on this day.
That's right.
This is, we've gone from a clean tasting, dry hopped mead to something that's a little more adventurous. If you remember on our show, the Malt Sampler, where we two were tasting 3 really dark specialty grains in small batches, Black Patent, Black Prince, and Midnight Wheat. We really liked the beer that just had base malt and Midnight Wheat. And so I used that as the basis for this beer. Really simple malt bill. But then I couldn't stay simple. I made a coconut cream pie for Christmas. And so I had all this sweetened shredded coconut. And so I said, well, I'm going to toast some of that and put that with this dark beer and have a delicious beverage. So here's how this went. This is around a 2-gallon or 7.5 liter batch. So into 3.5 gallons of water at 161 degrees Fahrenheit or 3.25 liters at 72 C, I put 6 pounds or 2.7 kilograms of Maris Otter and 8 ounces or 226 grams of Midnight Wheat. And that's the malt bill. I mashed for an hour at 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 C. And at the beginning of a 60-minute boil, I put in 1 ounce or 28 grams of UK Fuggles at 4.7% alpha acid. And I pitched Imperial A10 Darkness. The original gravity was 1069, final gravity 1016 for an ABV of 7.1%. Then what I did was I took 3.5 ounces or 100 grams of sweetened shredded coconut and I toasted it in a pan until it was nice and toasty, and then I put it in a bag and put it into the beer along with, or into a Mr. Beer fermenter along with the beer, and I aged that for I think 3 days, and then I bottled with some of those little prime tabs or carb tabs or carb drops, and here we go. Now it took a long time to carbonate, and I was thinking, is the room too cold? You know, should I pitch more yeast? And finally, my version that I just put into, and I bottled it on the 17th, December 17th, and here we are, you know, a month and 3 or 4 days later.
Right.
So, it just, I opened one, you know, last night, and it was carbonated.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the ingredients of the shredded coconut, the Great Value shredded coconut. Coconut, sugar, water, propylene glycol, which sustains freshness, salt, and sodium metabisulfite to retain the color. Go. So, does that word, any of those words sound familiar to you, Steve? Sodium metabisulfite. What does it mean to you as a winemaker?
Well, that's what you use to ensure that your wine doesn't ferment anymore. Potassium metabisulfite or sodium metabisulfite are both used as sanitizing agents in winemaking. And if you've ever used Camden tablets, they're either made from one of those 2 chemicals. They're potassium or sodium. I use potassium because I don't really like to use sodium. I just don't want to put salt in it necessarily. But so I use and only sell the potassium versions of them. But that's what they're for. They're preservatives. They ensure that coconut doesn't rot.
Right. And so I put that in the beer before I put it with the sugar in order to carbonate the beer. And so it's interesting. We were talking before we started recording. You refrigerated your bottle what, about a month or so ago?
Probably so. I just inadvertently, I took home a bunch of beer before Christmas that I've been given some beers as gifts. You always drop off some beers, generally for the store, but just, we trade beers. And I just took a bunch of it home. This beer made it into the home bunch and made it into the fridge probably about a month ago.
Mm.
It's probably been sitting there, for the whole time. And it's flat as a pancake. I mean, it is like there ain't nothing going on in this thing.
So the A10 darkness, being a yeast, I guess it struggled after I put that preservative in there with it. But watch this. If this works out the way that the one I tried last night,
Yep.
You hear that? Now watch this. So even though it struggled for a long time, if finally the yeast won out, and look at that. That's delicious. So if at first you don't succeed, if your beer doesn't doesn't carbonate at first, just give it a little chance. Now the head disappears fairly quickly, and I think that's because of the coconut oil.
Yeah.
In the coconut.
Yeah. The oil's gonna just kill the head.
Mm-hmm.
But that's great that the beer carbonated for you.
Yeah.
But also to go back to our discussion about that for a moment, had you also had a little potassium sorbate in there, then the beer would not have carbonated. So in other words, when I have folks stabilize their wines or their meads so that they don't have a sparkling product at the end of the day, I always tell people to use both sorbate and metabisulfite, so that, because they do two different things. One of them is kind of like birth control for yeast. It just makes sure that they can't multiply anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So once they've all done everything they can do and they die, they haven't made any more babies. But then
I see a children's book coming out.
Yeah, there'll be one. I'm going to call it Arthur. Arthur makes beer.
There you go.
However, this has definitely been carbonated. It's definitely alcoholic. It tastes actually quite good. Not being carbonated, it's a little sweet on the tongue. Couldn't drink a whole lot of it, but it actually tastes really good. So, good job of brewing.
Well, thank you. So imagine it had a little more carbonation to balance it out a little bit more. What do you think of the coconut level and that contribution of the midnight wheat?
Well, okay. So the coconut level is great in it. It comes through really nicely, and it's not too candy-like. Sometimes it can be overpowering, and sometimes people will put it in and you can't taste it at all. So this is just right. Now onto the grain bill. I am just like amazed at what a simple grain bill like this, a good base malt, and the addition of one specialty malt, in this case, midnight wheat. I've made so many stouts. I've got 3 or 4 beer kits that I sell that have quite complicated grain bills in them. They're great beers. I really don't mean to knock my own recipes or other people's, but I am blown away, absolutely blown away at what a great stout this is, and these really, really simple grain bills make. And it makes me think about traditional brewing in the case of Britain, say, and so you've got a light base malt and say some brown malt. You've got a light malt and you've got a dark malt, and maybe they had the light malt and then the brewer roasted the dark malt. I mean, who, I don't really know. I'm not a historian, but they didn't have access to all the stuff that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your little town, in your little village, and you made a dark beer, and it tasted really good because it was toasty and roasty and all of that, but it probably just had one grain maybe, but it was manipulated and which is, it. I love it. It doesn't have to have 16 different kinds of grain in it.
Yeah. And that's something that we learned
that's
from
my point.
that malt sampler was, it was just the base malt and midnight wheat or black patent or black Prinz. And we were just blown away at how delicious and rich those beers were with just that simple malt bill. It's not like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this to make the brewing software happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was just base malt and some specialty grains. And then the coconut, I think the coconut in here, I got a can of coconut beer. I think it was from a brewery in Oklahoma, and I wish I'd saved the can or taken a picture. But it was just like, wow, so much coconut. And it was really delicious. And in my mind, I was comparing it against this beer, which is not just like smash your face in with all the coconut. And I was like, oh, wow, mine wasn't as coconutty. But then when I taste this now, the coconut is a part of it. It's not, you could double or triple the amount of coconut in this beer, or maybe the contact time, or something like that to increase the amount of coconuttiness. And it'd be a different beer, but this is pretty darn good because you still get the coconut, but it's not, it's not, smashing you in the face with a coconut shell. So
Right.
that's my excuse for not having as much coconut as I was expecting.
All right, James.
All right, show number 2 of this shooting day. And the next beer is yours. So you get to talk next time. So I'm coasting from here on out. All right, everybody.
I'm coasting.
Try it. It's a simple grain bill, but it's really nice. And there's you can bring some complexities in it by toasting some coconut, put it in there, and just take care of your beer and use good ingredients, good fresh ingredients, and you can just have some deliciousness. So there you go. Happy brewing, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Come and visit us online. At basicbrewing.com, you can find archive lists of our audio and video podcasts on home brewing. You can also find our DVDs and our brewer's logbook, where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. If you're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, stop by Steve's Brew Shop or find him online at stevesbrewshop.com.
I don't care if there's a bubble in there or not.